You can always tell my workbench when I've finished a major piece of work because there's crap all over the place. And one of my golden rules is when I'm about to start another section of the model, clean everything and put everything away. So I start with a fresh deck. Well, that's much better. And it really allows me to get to work and make a whole new mess again. So just to recap, we've made up all the various pieces. I can take them off now. And I've gone and reread all the forecastle information, things that will impact on the floorboards, on sheets, on ropes, on guys, on pulleys, so that I understand all the issues. I'm also going to take some pictures in here because when we lock this boy up, we're not going to be seeing anything more in there again. And I almost forgot to put in the ledges. Wouldn't be so good. So the first job in this video is to deal with the breast beam, which is the last beam in the forecastle. And that has on it a shear molding just below the lip that we put here. Luckily, I have this scraper, as I've made this molding before. So it's just a matter of putting a very small amount of glue on it, without anything spilling anywhere, and then using some very gentle clamps, because the clamps could easily mar the piece if they're too strong. It's so thin that you do have to be careful. To make up this molding, there are many ways you could approach it. You could simply take a piece of wood and sand both sides and get a nice round curve, and then take a file and move it across a line which will give you a little sink, and then cut down the back side of it to get to the 2.5 inches. In my case, I have this Proxon shaper, which I've had for a number of years. I think it's called an MT300. There may be a modern version of it now, which with all these various bits allows you to make some very complex shapes. Now the piece we're going to make is an extremely small piece, and if we use the final dimensions and put it on the router table, the odds of us hurting ourselves are pretty good because it's very, very flexible. So I tend to use a larger piece of wood, which I'll shape, and then when I've got it all correct, then I go on the table saw and just cut out the final shape. So the first thing we're going to do is put a round curve on the piece of wood. This wood is 3 inches thick, and remember, so we'll want on this side of the lip 3 inches, on this side we want to come down to 2.5 inches. And there's a little sink in the middle that allows you to curve the piece down. We simply put the piece on. I have lots of space to hold my hands. Put the machine on. That does one side. And now I've got a nice rounded surface. In this case, I need to take a little more off. So again, I put it up, adjust a little bit more. That should be enough. And now I've got a perfect curve on this side. Then I'm going to change and use a different bit, a circular bit, which will run right up against the edge and give me a very fine cut on the inside here. Now I've changed a bit, and I'm going to run this along on this side here. And I've got the perfect indentation. So now I have it's down, perfect round, and then I'll simply cut the back. And then I'll take a chisel and take the back part of this down to the 2.5 inches. course, another way of doing this is to have a shaper that's made up that gives you the beautiful curve at the end of the piece. And you can also modify the shaper so it actually comes down a bit and gives you that inside curve that takes you down to the 2.5 inches. And that might be much simpler if you don't have an expensive Proxon shaper. Now I'm going to install the lip onto the breast beam, and I have a little gauge that I'm using to make sure that it is in the exact spot. I also test fitted it because I want a nice tight fit, not too slack but not too tight. And then I'm going to use some clamps to hold it on, and these clamps are really quite soft or gentle clamps because I have to make sure that I don't mark the piece, which could happen if I use some very strong clamps. And you'll notice I'm using PVA glue, again easy to clean up, because as you clamp it in place you're going to get some of the glue coming out. And the forward edge of the lip is only 2.5 inches, so again making sure that I set it perfectly. But it has to be a very clean line between the butt joint, between the deck planks that are going to come back to it, and that lip that is on the breast beam. And you may not have noticed, but that lip piece is actually made out of coffee wood, because like the main deck, the forecastle is going to be planked in coffee wood as well, and so that little lip has to match the overall of the deck planking. Now I'm doing a final check. This is the bulk floor planks, just to make sure everything lines up and that there's that the inner edge of the lip matches the plank perfectly, because this is the last chance I'll have to fix a problem. So off to the back shop I went and made some bulk stock, and I've gone on the Jim Barnes and made a whole bunch of floorboards. If you're going to use the curved planks on the Forecastle deck, you will have to make some wider stock to compensate for the curve on each of the individual planks. Again, I've been reading about the waterway. The waterway is 4 inches high, and then it comes all the way down to the 2.5 inch, which are the deck board, the thickness of the deck boards. And again, in that, the waterway, there's a slight dip in it to allow the water to run along the edge. And then when it comes to the breast beam, again, David points out, there's a little sink that allows the water to flow clearly off and onto the main deck, and of course it'll then run out through the various holes. And the first thing I'll do is make up a little template to work out the curve on the bow of the boat. And I quickly am reminded that I'm not David and Greg, and so what I've found is the curve on the left side isn't exactly the curve on the right side. Surprise, surprise. And I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I'm going to do the raised portion, which is a 4-inch piece with a slight taper on it, up against the edge, and then the actual sloping waterway, which comes back to that, will form a second piece. The total thickness of that seems to be about 8 inches. As is my normal technique, I pre-bend the piece on my form. I do this for about 20 seconds, and then I take it off and do the final bending on the model itself. And when I'm on the model, just to make sure it doesn't affect anything else, I only heat it maybe for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then leave it and come back about a minute or 2 later, do it, and do this about 4 or 5 times. And what I find is I get an absolutely perfect shape, a perfect fit. As I looked at the bent piece, I realized that in the compound bend at the top, it was actually getting a little lift. So again, simply put it on the piece, put some heavy clamps on it, and then heated it back. But when you're heating, you need to use a metal onto the wood, otherwise your plastic is going to melt. Now we're going to take the inside edge down, because again, if you look at the diagram, remember it's got a curve, and we're going to have a plank that's on it like that, so it's a very little edge, a very thin edge. So we just need to take this down to the 2.5 inch, and I haven't found a magic way to do it, so I simply have this little sander which I'm using to create that edge. Now we'll just stick the piece on the boat. Now it's time to make the second piece of the waterway, and that turned out to be really challenging. First of all, I made up a series of templates to get it to fit, and no matter how hard I tried to make a perfect fit of the 4-inch piece, of course it followed the imperfections of the boat, and it wasn't a nice clean curve, so really quite challenging. I think I made up 3 or 4 of these. And then multiple wooden pieces. Of course, I tried to make a scarf joint on it, and I made 4 attempts at the scarf joint. But then when you take the piece and you've made it up, and then you go to fit it, and you start adjusting the piece, the scarf joint looks horrible. It looks off-center. You take off more on the inside than the outside. So in the end, I decided to make a false scarf joint, and I was lucky enough. I have some wide coffee wood, and so I was able to make the piece, cut the piece in one section, and then at 8-foot centers, I put the scarf joint in. Real challenging, and I'm glad I've got at least one down. Now I'll do the other side. We use this protractor to set the line, but this protractor is going to follow this line off the model and may not be a nice perfect curve. And to be able to fit the pieces in here, we need a really nice perfect curve. So we take the French ruler and we go along and use the French ruler to harden the line. So you're finding a space where the French ruler matches the curve that I've just drawn. And then I highlight that. And what that's going to allow me to do is to get an absolutely clean line. And that helps when we start to put the planks along, that we're going to get planks that will fit it. Now these planks, and certainly maybe at least 3 or 4 of them, will actually have to be shaped until eventually they become straight. So that's looking really very nice. Just to clean up, and then we're just going to take down the edge again to give that angled appearance. Although it's so slight, it's hard to see. I think it came out pretty good. And these will be the planks that we'll put in there. So we do the other side and then start on the middle and then come in. In the book, David challenges us in the installation of the planks. Instead of having nice straight pieces like we had on the main deck below as it came to the bow, he has a lot of these planks, probably more than 3/4 of them, actually tapered and curved. And at first I said to myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do straight pieces and deal with the curve just maybe on 1 or 2 sections. And then I said, why not get up to the challenge? And the solution turned out not to be as hard as I thought it was. Out comes the handy French ruler, and we can put it on the plan that he has here, and we notice that it will follow a shape that matches the curve on the French ruler. So the first place we need to do is to go back to the model and work out what this inner curve is, and then we do the same process we've done when we were planking the rest of the model. Work out the number of planks, and at different parts you will be able to work out where the cutoff is on each board, and that will give you the thickness at this point as we go all the way through. So whatever the width is here, it divides back to the number of boards, and that gives you the thickness at the end. And he has 1, 2, 3 planks where we have this interesting join, and after the 4th one it just goes straight forward like it did on the main plank below, on the main deck below. So let me just take you through the sequence. To create this piece, the first thing I had to do was work out what this shape was, and to do that I simply took the template that I used to build the waterway and marked it off on this template, and then applied this to a piece of wood and drew the line on it. Then I cut this piece off on the bandsaw and came and very carefully fitted this piece into here so that I got a perfect match here. For the outside piece, I wanted to make a nice clean line. So then I came with the French ruler, put it on to the shape. I knew what the thickness of the plank was here, and I knew what the thickness of the plank was here, and then I found a matching shape, marked it off, and then came back onto the piece of wood and applied it. This is where it would be, and applied it here, and now I get a nice clean French line which will be very easy to match when I make the next piece that will fit onto this one. Now we can go and work out the second piece which will fit here, again using the same technique of measuring the distance here, working out the number of planks, which gives you the width of the plank at this stage, and again we have a standard width on the inside here. I wouldn't hide the fact that it was challenging. The first thing you do is you make up a little paper template which gives you the rough shape. Then before you think about the side, you need to fit this piece in and get it to fit, which is pretty good. So there's no magic place to put this. You put it where you're comfortable with. And so that's how I've drawn it, and I'll fit it to suit. But you can see it's a nice curve on the French ruler. Absolutely perfect. So just clean that up. I'll want to take this down in here. That's a perfect fit. Then we'll rub off all the pencil lines, and we can use this as a template on the other side just to make the rough cardboard cutout. Interesting, they're almost identical on each side, which is really rewarding. So here we are again. Spent a lot of time just trying to get a nice perfect fit, and we got it fit on this side. So now we do the same thing we did on the other side. In doing the next piece, to get this shape on the next piece, it's going to be this shape. So again, just put the piece on a blank piece of wood and cut it out, and you know you're going to be extending this way, and you'll get a perfect match when this piece comes to fit on this piece. And do that for both sides. Another interesting way to determine what this curve is to take the French ruler and simply try and line it up on the inside, and then just take the ruler and put it on the board and draw out a line, and you'll get a line that lines up with this inside curve. Of course, if you don't have expensive shapers and tools, and you can simply take a little hand plane and take the piece down until you get to the approximate line. Another little hint to help with the cleanup is you have lots of pencil marks on the piece, and when you go to glue it, glue will get on top of the piece, making it very difficult to get rid of the pencil marks. So I tend to use a rubber and get rid of them, especially when I'm going to pencil in the edge anyway, to give me the fake corking line. As most of you who have experienced, when you reach to the closing phase of a planking exercise, it really is a lovely feeling. So here we go, and in she goes, and we've got our perfect fit. Just scrape off the excess glue, just to make cleanup easier for us afterwards. And I like to put a little weight on it. Been a nice challenging exercise to get this finally done. So all that's left is the cleanup and then the installation of the various pieces, which we'll tackle in the next video. So again, thanks for keeping me company, and I'll see you in my next video when I continue my pledge to just keep modeling.